The history of the British Isles is mired with bloodshed, from the migrations of the Celts, the occupation of Rome, the Germanic tribes, the conquest of the Scandinavians, and even the Norman invasions. Yet forgotten to history is a tale of the English and the Irish, which blazes a trail of heroes and villains that arose on both sides of the Irish Sea. And one of those heroes gained not just hatred from her enemies, but also their respect, and in some cases their admiration. Grace O'Malley, the Pirate Queen.
Come, gather round, lads, and listen to a tale that stands beyond the sea. The storm, the tides, and the ships in the deep will tell the story of the pirate queen. She brought fear to the navigator's hearts and conquered the horizon, while the Irish nobles sleep in their beds. Beware, for the seas there.
I do want to quickly apologise for the fact that I'm probably going to use a lot of the anglicised names in this video. Don't worry, no one is judging me more than my Irish ancestors.
Traitor!
Clan O'Malley rose to power in the west of Ireland during the 1300s, ruling the southern portion of Clew Bay. The clan/family motto was Terra Marique Potens, or Valiant by Sea and Land. Grace was born into the O'Malley clan, a predominantly seafaring family in County Mayo in Connacht in the year 1530. Well, as far as we know. We're going to learn there's a lot of different versions of her story, and I've had to put together what I can consider as the most comprehensive version. I have included some of the other versions, or some of the times it shoots off. This is where I saw things repeating, and so if it repeated a lot, I was like, okay, that probably did happen. The chieftain of the O'Malley clan was Grace's father, Owen. There's the Irish spelling there. I'm not going to pronounce that, because it'll be offensive. Ireland in the 16th century was comprised of an English Dublin with a Gaelicised Old English and native Irish clans living autonomously from the crown. However, after Henry VIII
No, there's a couple of drips right there.
proclaimed himself King of Ireland, which was signed in by the Irish Parliament, this began a trend that would seek to centralise Ireland and end Gaelicisation. I'm sorry if I've mispronounced that. It's a long word. And instead, Anglicise the entire population. Grace grew up learning every nook and cranny of her uncharted waters of Clew Bay, a remote and wild area on the west coast of Ireland. She was most likely well educated, as sources at the time speculate that 16th century noblewomen in Ireland were actually quite well educated. At the age of 12 or 13, Grace was being prepared for marriage, but she didn't really care and only aspired to set sail. Grace would demand to go to sea with her father, but was forbade by her parents as she was a young woman and it wasn't her place. That, and her parents said her hair was too long. So Grace rectified the situation. Grace would cut her hair short. Not like, she didn't go full skinhead, but she cut her hair fairly short. Grace would keep her hair short her entire life, which would earn her the nickname Granny Maul, or Bold Grace. Grace then stowed away, waiting until they were too far out to sea to turn back. In a twist of history, her father loved this action. This was partly due to the fact that Grace's half-brother, known as Donald of the Pipes, wasn't exactly a mariner. Still, Grace had to follow tradition, and at the age of 15, she would marry Donald O'Flaherty in 1546. During this marriage, Grace would become active in Irish politics, and Donald would teach her the ways of piracy, although some stories have him as a brazen husband who left her at home to look after the children. Upon his murder via a rival clan, Grace took back Donald's castle and defeated his murderers. She would then acquire his fleet, and the clans who once followed Donald now stood firmly by Grace, even though she was a woman. In this moment, Grace had become one of the most powerful women in Ireland, and all at the age of 23.
All I do is win, win, win.
Around the time of her husband's death, the English Council of Dublin began receiving complaints that her ships were behaving like pirates. Foreshadowing. The marriage produced 3 children, Owen, Margaret, and Murragh. Grace became chieftain of the O'Malley clan in 1553 when her father died. This was a rarity at this point in time, as although Ireland could be considered as slightly more progressive, women at this point still weren't allowed to be chieftains. Grace's response to this was essentially, "Do I look like I give a fuck?" The English began collecting taxes in Galway. In response to this, Grace claimed taxes in Clew Bay. Taking advantage of her local knowledge, she ensured that no merchant ship found its way past the winding rivers, inlets and islands without paying her. If they didn't pay the tax, Grace knew where to attack the larger merchant ships, and in a fleet of her smaller workboats would use the terrain to her advantage and often take an easy victory. Grace didn't hold back either, and anyone who ventured into her waters was fair game. Grace targeted English, Portuguese, Ottoman, Spanish, and even Irish ships. One of the stories I fell in love with while researching the Pirate Queen was on a trip to Dublin. Grace attempted to visit Howth Castle. She was informed that Lord Howth and his family were at dinner and the castle gates were closed to her. Grace, being a rational human being, decided to abduct the Earl's grandson and heir, Christopher St. Lawrence. For his safe return, all Grace wanted was the gates to be kept open to unexpected visitors, and the Lord keep an extra place set at each meal. Lord Howth actually agreed to these terms and gave her a ring as a pledge to the agreement. This ring is still in possession of one of Grace's descendants today, and the agreement is still honoured by the descendants of Lord Howth. They even named a street after her. In 1566, Grace married Richard Burke, Irish spelling. Something she did as a strategic move, uniting her territories in Clew Bay with his. Grace actually had a prenup written for a 1-year trial period. Even though it's unclear if this was allowed in the laws at the time, there is documentation of this prenup. After a year, Grace would lock Richard out of his own castle, and according to legend, could be heard shouting down at him, "I dismiss thee." I can't say I don't completely admire the flair for the dramatic here. While we're on the topic, Ireland actually had fairly forward-thinking divorce laws at the time, and these favoured neither men nor women, so both men and women could seek to end a marriage without fearing that they would lose their lands or titles or money. The two actually remained close allies and business partners for years, and it's not really clear if they remarried or stayed married or what, but together their combined forces sailed to Galway to meet the Governor of Ireland, Sir Henry Sidney. Grace stated that she was offering her services to England, when in actuality it was a show of strength, and Henry decided that Grace was a better friend than foe. Oddly though, Richard and Grace presented as married for years to come. Grace even took on the title of Lady Bourke when Richard received his knighthood. She would also become pregnant to Richard and would have their son, Theobald, Irish name next to it, who would become known as Toby of the Ships. You see, at the time, Ireland, as was much of Europe, was currently being raided by Barbary or Ottoman corsairs. These pirates were mainly looking for slaves, but particularly blonde and red-haired women who would be sold into Ottoman harems for life. There are slight variations in this story. Some people say what happened a mere 2 hours after Grace gave birth to Toby. Some people say it was the next day. What we do know is some Ottoman corsairs attacked the ship. They weren't getting this redhead. Hearing her men losing above deck, Grace burst out of the captain's quarters in a fit of rage, bearing only a musket, and fired it at the nearest corsair, although some versions of the tale have her coming out with pistols drawn. Either way, in this moment, the battle turned. Richard would sadly die soon after the birth of his son. However, the legend of Grace O'Malley actually scared the Barbary pirates from pillaging the coast of Ireland for a short time, although this claim is connected more to the legend, so I can't verify it. During her reign, Grace would actually acquire several castles and their lands, either through marriages or through conquest. She would eventually acquire Doona at Blacksod, Kildavernet at Achill Island, the O'Malley Castle on Clare Island, and Rockfleet in Clew Bay. The reason I bring this up is because of a story of an attack on Kinturk Castle near Castle Bar. Grace noticed that Toby wasn't pulling his weight in the battle, and she shouted at him those words, or in words I could pronounce without insulting an entire language, "Are you trying to hide in my arse? That place you came out of." Imagine your mum rinsing you while she's being shot at, and you're using her to avoid being shot at. Again, according to legend, Grace set out with her men when hearing of a shipwreck. She was searching for spoils and instead found Hugh de Lacy, allegedly the son of a rich merchant. Grace would nurse Hugh back to health and then took him as her lover. If you think about it, she nursed him beyond health. Although there is a weird power dynamic thing here that makes me feel a little uncomfortable. Grace did look after Hugh for as long as she could. During a hunt, the MacMahuns, a rival clan, stalked and ambushed Hugh. Hearing of his death, Grace reacted calmly and negotiated with the clan. No. Grace immediately found and took the lives of the men responsible, and I can safely say I would not have wanted to have been them. However, Grace was unsatisfied with this and set sail to Doona in the south, the MacMahun stronghold. Grace did actually take the castle and garrison it with her own men, and as sad as this part of the story is, this was Grace at the absolute height of her power. It is suggested that she had an illegitimate child, and the fact that this didn't really come back to haunt her, from as much as I could see, shows that Ireland at the time was a slightly more liberal society, as its Celtic influences brought a new interpretation of Christianity. With the threat of Spanish invasion looming, tensions again began to rise, as the English believed the Irish clans, or the Irish as a whole, may side with the Spanish.
If I risk my neck for you, will I get a chance to kill Englishmen?
Queen Elizabeth I would consider a complete conquest of Ireland in order to secure it from Spain. In 1584, Richard Bingham was sent to Galway to bring Ireland's lords to heel. Now, we've already had a Richard in this story, so to avoid confusion, we're just going to use the short form of Richard for Bingham, and the short form of Richard is Dick. Dick tracked down Grace's son Owen and 20 clansmen on an island near Castle Ban-Owen. Dick hanged them all, leaving Owen for last, and he was found with multiple wounds on his body whilst being tied up, although some sources say it was actually Dick's brother John that did this. Grace would rally the O'Malleys, the O'Flahertys and the Burkes in open revolt that was essentially a personal conflict with Bingham. Grace quickly realised she was outnumbered 25-1 and could not face this new English army head on. She would resort to guerrilla warfare and make use of her superior local knowledge, using the tight coves and rocky hillsides to keep the upper hand on Dick and his men. Dick would begin bribing rival chieftains and clans, which infuriated Grace as she saw it as a betrayal from her own countrymen, and she decided anyone who sided with Bingham would be fair game. Sadly, this would come to include one of her own sons, Moreau, or Morick, or... I'm sorry, I'm not good at this pronunciation stuff. Grace would sail around the coast to see him and attack his castle.
You thunder against me!
You have done that yourself!
Killed at least 4 or 5 of his defenders, and then burned his ships, ensuring future loyalty, and this did seem to work. I mean, having your mum come round, kill a load of your guards, and then burn your stuff, you're gonna sit down for a little bit and just rethink your life. However, Grace was losing the war. She had met her match in Bingham, and he would send a fleet of warships into Clew Bay under the guise of negotiating a truce, which he lured her out of her stronghold and arrested her. Grace was trapped in prison for many months, yet she still had some old friends in the old administration of Sir Henry Sidney. She would send word to them, and much to her luck, many of them hated Bingham. This allowed her freedom as long as various members of her clan took her place. Grace needed a win. Grace decided to fight Bingham in a game of wits, and she turned to the other most powerful redhead in the British Isles, Queen Elizabeth I. Grace would state that she had no issue with the English and laid bare Bingham's crimes to the Queen. Bingham stated that Grace had spent her life pillaging English ships and starting revolts. He also imprisoned Toby, Grace's favourite son. Grace's first appeal to Queen Elizabeth is dated 1593. As time went on, the threat of Toby being executed also grew. Both women were in their early 60s, yet despite this age and wisdom, this was still an insane risk for Grace. She was heading into the literal centre of her enemy's power. As she went up the Thames, the bodies of long-dead pirates swung idly. Grace, however, knew she could be useful. Elizabeth had already funded people like Drake and Hawkins, who the Spanish considered pirates. Grace actually spoke several languages, including bits of French, Scottish Gaelic, English and Spanish, although Latin was her second language, which she used to communicate with Queen Elizabeth I. Legend would have it that Grace didn't bow when she met Elizabeth, as she believed that she was a queen of the sea, making her an equal to Elizabeth. Therefore, she did not need to bow. Despite this slight against her, Elizabeth was actually incredibly interested in Grace, and mildly enjoyed that someone would openly defy her in a way no one else really had. As they got to talking, Grace insisted that since her pardon she had lived a simple farmer's life.
But farming? Really? Man of your talents?
Grace also stated that utterly did she give over her former trade. Elizabeth, at this time herself known as the commander of armies and emperor of the seas, she was at the apex of her rule. Yet Elizabeth hadn't set foot on a battlefield and she had sailed no ships. So Elizabeth was in awe of Grace's adventures. All charges against Grace and her family were dropped, except for the one where Grace attacked her own son's castle, which Elizabeth found quite amusing. Elizabeth recommended that Toby be released and that monies be diverted from taxes on her son's estates to provide a pension for Grace. Bingham was then ordered to protect them to live in peace and enjoy their livelihoods. Elizabeth remained confident that Grace, as long as she lived, would be a dutiful subject.
That's got to be the best pirate I've ever seen.
So it would seem.
Grace returned to Clew Bay triumphant. Her lands recognised by royal decree, Bingham was furious and did not trust the deal in the slightest.
She's acting like she's the queen and we're the sorry people.
Dick actually went as far as to have men stationed in Grace's now diminished lands. Grace again appealed to the Queen and set sail for London again in 1595 to speak with her once more. Bingham feared having new charges brought against him and fled to England. He was then captured and imprisoned. It's like a mouse trying to escape by running into the mousetrap. There is, however, an alternate account of the meeting between the Queen, in that they spoke in English, not Latin, because Grace didn't speak any Latin. Elizabeth also refused to return any of the lands that Dick stole from Grace and eventually reinstated him in Ireland, pushing Grace to support Irish insurgents against the English. Which of these two versions you believe is up to you. Personally, I believe a bit more in the first because I found more sources talking about that version. An English captain would state that he met her returning from a raid in Scotland after a chieftain had raided her lands earlier in that year. She was 67 at the time. However, she is getting old at this point and the inevitable happened. Most modern historians believe that Grace died at Rockfleet Castle of natural causes in 1603, the same year as Queen Elizabeth, and both women were aged 73 years old. Grace would sadly be ignored by Irish historians who were usually religious monks at this time period, although her enemies, those who hated her and those who respected her alike, wrote most of what we know. Known to English captains as the chief commander of thieves and murderers at sea, some saw her as a bold and courageous heroine, like me who totally wasn't simping as he was researching this, and others saw her as a cutthroat thief. Some English adversaries of Grace stated that she was a woman who hath imprudently passed the part of womanhood. She was buried at the Cistercian Abbey on Clare Island. I just want to say a huge thank you to KINNIA and 5 Pint Mary for allowing me to use their music in this video, and you can check them out because they will be linked below. If you want to support me further, you can become a patron and get access to sneak peeks and some of my bi-weekly videos 48 hours early. If you fancy, you can grab yourself some lovely Discord privileges as well. Another way to support me is to visit my merch store or check out my book on Amazon. Lastly, the best way to help me is to like, subscribe and share, as well as following me on other platforms such as TikTok, Instagram and now Twitter. Once again, I would love to thank KINNIA and 5 Pint Mary for allowing me to use their amazing work and helping me to bring to life the tale of the Pirate Queen. And with that, I'll see you all in the next one.
Grace O'Malley is my name, and my tale now I will tell. Be I bound for the pearly gates, to the devil down in hell. A fearsome lass am I, and a pirate is my trade. I take my gold, no grudges hold, for the choices I have made. I sail the Galway shores with my pirate fleet at hand. I never knew a more worthy crew in all of Ireland. Ye merchant ships beware, when in our seas you roam, you'll have to face the wrath of Grace O'Malley, hail your home. And it's sail with me boys through the night time, sail with me boys through the day. Black Salt Bay.